This week on The Climate Show, it's all about sewage, poo if you must, and how projects like this will help keep it out of our rivers. Welcome to the show where this week you find me 60 metres below London, and I'm down in this extraordinarily massive project to learn how tunnels like this could help keep sewage out of the Thames. It is, if you like, an HS2 for poo. We'll also look at how our appetite for cheap chicken could be killing one of Britain's most beautiful rivers. And hear about the growing row in Ohio over a toxic train crash that released dangerous chemicals into the environment. Authorities say there is no risk, but residents say it's making them sick. But first to the intensifying row of how we keep sewage out of the sea and our rivers. You've all seen those pictures of those brown plumes mixing in with the waves or the current. Well, projects like this one in London could help. And are they a blueprint for places elsewhere? The problem is they cost billions, not cheap. How do you solve a problem like 39 million cubic metres of sewage water entering the Thames each year? Enough to fill 16,000 Olympic swimming pools. With a very big hole and associated pipework. And when I say pipework, we're talking something you could drive double-decker buses through side by side for nearly 20 miles. London's Victorian sewers were engineering marvels of their time, designed to end the great stink that had settled over the capital. But over 100 years later, a design decision has become a major flaw. Foul water from our homes flows down into the sewers, but the same pipes also carry rainwater running off roads and roofs. So downpours can overwhelm the system, and to prevent it backing up into homes, it is deliberately dumped into the river. In London, the new super sewer will instead provide an alternative tunnel deep beneath the Thames to take those overflows away, stopping them entering the river. The hope is that no more stuff we flush will gush from these combined sewage overflows. Last year, untreated sewage flowed from them into the Thames 1,279 separate times.
So when the sewers get full, they overflow, and of course when they were designed, that would have been a very, very rare event. But today, with all of the development, with population growth, it's a very regular occurrence, and pretty much whenever it rains to any significant degree in London, it will be overflowing directly into the River Thames.
The sewage system will now overflow into here, not the river, and flow down to be treated in Beckton, East London. This enormous shaft here not only provides access at the moment, but when it's finished, this and 3 more like it will be massive sewage storage tanks, able to take in any excess in a huge rainstorm. But with up to 4,000 workers, a 9-year build and a price ticket of £4 billion, who pays?
It's being paid for actually through a kind of levy, if you like, on water bills. So that obviously spreads the cost across many, many millions of people. Could systems like this, albeit smaller for smaller cities, work maybe elsewhere in Britain? Because this problem of sewage in our rivers isn't confined to the Thames. Yeah, that's right. I think it would depend on the conditions and the nature of the system and the waterways and so on. But there are many deep tunnel solutions across the world.
This week, the government announced plans to make it easier to fine water companies for spills. Inspectors may be busy, though, as last year the campaign group Surfers Against Sewage recorded 14,000 untreated leaks.
So some of the worst offenders this year have been Southern Water, which is no surprise, with over 10,000 alerts. South West Water in the thousands as well. And we see it across the country.
It's unsightly, it's unpleasant, but really, why does it matter?
It matters for human health and also environmentally as well. Last year, we collated more than 700 instances where people have got sick after being in the water.
The sewage is a threat to the natural world too. Every day, twice a day, the ebbing tide here on the Thames reveals the lasting evidence of sewage pollution. And here it is. You see this? It's held together by wet wipes. These only come through the sewers. That's how they got here, and you know what came alongside them. This reef of wet wipes extends along this bit of the river, and the pollution that comes with it has wider impacts.
If you have a big slick of sewage into the river, as it breaks down, and bacteria will break down the organic matter in the river, they will use up oxygen, so you'll end up with huge areas of deoxygenated water. Fish can't breathe, so you'll see them sometimes at the edge gasping, or they just kills fish outright, and you can have thousands of dead fish.
So there's actually fish suffocating because of the sewage?
Yeah.
Cleaning Britain's rivers sounds highly desirable but very expensive, and a big row is brewing over who pays the lion's share. The government told us they are committed to improving the quality of waterways and have put the strictest targets ever on water companies to clean up their act. But who ultimately pays? Water companies by slashing profits, or us through rising bills? It's not just sewage that's polluting our waters, but farming too. Fraser Maud has been out on the River Wye in Herefordshire, seeing how our insatiable appetite for cheap chicken could be suffocating one of Britain's most famous rivers.
On the surface, the River Wye seems as beautiful as ever. The problem is what lies beneath. OK, so here we are near the riverbank, Jamie. Just what sort of state is the Wye in today?
Yes, well, it looks beautiful, doesn't it? But sadly, on closer inspection, lots of problems. Increasingly, the Wye under threat from phosphates. It should be teeming with wonderful life, salmon, bird species, but things are under pressure.
The high phosphate levels in the Wye come from one of the catchment's main forms of agriculture, chicken farming. The phosphorus-rich manure from millions of birds raised on hundreds of farms like this has traditionally been used as fertiliser, but it can run off into the river.
That's a kind of a burst of nutrient for the river, which sees the kind of result of algal blooms happen, crowding out other species because there isn't enough oxygen. So the decline of key plant species like ranunculus, kind of the mangrove of the Wye, holding onto carbon, providing an environment for invertebrates and smaller species. And then with that destruction, the rest of the system can't function.
The Wye used to be crystal clear and brimming with life. Not anymore, say the conservationists. One simple indicator of the pressures that the River Wye has been under in recent decades is the amount of salmon that are in the river. Back in 1967, 8,000 were caught from the River Wye. In 2021, that number had fallen to less than 330. And some experts fear that in 10 years' time, if nothing changes, there'll be no salmon in the Wye at all. Rather than simply being the source of the problem, some farms like this one managed by James Wright are trying to be part of the solution.
We're running at 60 over 50 to the end of last crop. Sheds are warm enough.
Here, a £3 million incinerator unit turns the droppings into phosphate-rich ash. That creates heat for the chicken sheds and a form of fertiliser that can be sold for use outside the River Wye's catchment.
In terms of the Wye, it's a step in the right direction. I think, farmers from all livestock sectors and the arable sector have recognised that soil management is extremely important. We need to prevent phosphate-rich soils getting into our watercourses. We need to apply our manures and fertilisers responsibly, of which we're doing, and we're working hard at that, and we have been for at least a decade.
Not all farms are behaving responsibly, though. The Environment Agency has issued hundreds of advisory notices to those that aren't, but there is little enforcement.
The agencies that government finance to look after the environment, like the Environment Agency, have had its budget cut by 75% over, since the beginning of austerity over the last 12 to 15 years. And as a result of what's been an emasculation of these bodies, no environmental protection has really been happening. No enforcement of environmental regulations have been happening. Very little monitoring and inspection of the pollution, the sources of pollution has been happening.
The Environment Agency says it is concerned about phosphate in the Wye and is working to solve the issue. One thing the farmers and the conservationists agree on is that to provide both food security and environmental protection, there needs to be a more coordinated approach to the problem. Fraser Maud, Sky News on the River Wye.
Not all the reefs in our waters are as unwelcome as this one. made as it is largely of wet wipes. We also have seagrass beds, which are vital for both fighting climate change and as a habitat. They have a remarkable ability to draw in and lock up carbon, but 90% of them around our coast have been lost in the last 100 years. But now the biggest ever restoration project is underway.
We're in Penachine on Penllyn Sarnau Special Area Conservation in North Wales, and we're here today to plant the first seagrass seeds. The purpose of this project is ultimately to restore 10 hectares of seagrass around North Wales. It's groundbreaking because we're not only creating the UK's biggest seagrass restoration project to date, but it's also about informing science. It also fights climate change by storing a lot of carbon, blocking a lot of carbon that's floating around with bits of dead seaweed, bits of dead seagrass, bits of fish scales, all sorts of types of carbon, and locking that into the sediment.
Well, there are, of course, many people who are doing their own bit to fight back against pollution on our beaches. One of them is Kirsty Crawford, who sent us this from the west coast of Scotland.
Hi, my name's Kirsty and I live in Scotland. I'm here on the beach today and I'm with my dog, Finn. So we're having a bit of a beach day, but we've noticed a problem. So Finn is really confused, wondering why we're still up here in the dunes and not down here where the fun happens. But that's because before we've even got as far, I've already started to spot the problem. And the problem is litter, so single-use lunch containers. I'm fortunate enough to work for a marine charity called the Marine Conservation Society, who campaign for and strive to protect our oceans. And one of the ways they do this is to take a real focus on beach-based litter, the reasons that it ends up here, and the steps that we can all take to try and reduce that. So there's a programme called Beach Watch that I'm going to take part in today. So today, as well as picking up all the rubbish that I'm going to find here on the beach, I'm going to, at the end, mark down the numbers on this survey sheet and find out the numbers of the different types of litter that are washing up here. Bottle, face mask, giant blue plastic thing. So this is a wet wipe. Could be a makeup wipe, could be one of those single-use wipes for cleaning the kitchen or the bathroom. These tend to get flushed down the toilet, into our sewer system, out to sea, and then ultimately on our beaches. It does make me worried what we're putting in here. The plastic and the sewage discharging and the rubbish and those toxic forever chemicals. And it does make me think twice about coming down here and going for a swim. By taking part in Beach Watch, by doing beach cleans, but also noting down your evidence, you're able to see how things are changing over time. And hopefully that means we can see the positives as well as the negatives, so we know when things are getting better rather than worse.
After the break, we go stateside to hear about a serious pollution incident after a train wreck spilled toxic chemicals into the environment. And 1 year on from Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, we take a look at the impact the devastating conflict has had on the environment. Welcome back to the Climate Show, where this week we've been hearing all about our polluted rivers and seas at home. But I want to take you across the pond to the US now, and a village in Ohio called East Palestine, where a huge freight train derailed earlier this month, releasing toxic chemicals into the environment. This week, former President Donald Trump turned up with thousands of bottles of his own Trump water to give to residents and accused the Biden administration of indifference to the disaster, despite having cut the regulation on the rail industry while he was in office.
I sincerely hope that when your representatives and all of the politicians get here, including Biden, they get back from touring Ukraine, that he's got some money left over.
So what actually happened here? Here's NBC News' Ron Allen, who's been reporting on the ground from East Palestine.
It's been nearly 3 weeks since this derailment happened, and as you can see, the trains have resumed passing through this small town of East Palestine. It's a town of about 5,000 people near the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. Typical small town America. This incident happened at 9 o'clock at night. The residents were rousted from their homes. There was a huge explosion, a huge, massive fire, clouds of smoke over the community. Firefighters and first responders evacuating several hundred residents.
We're urging everyone in this area, actually ordering them to leave.
A few days later, to diffuse the situation and prevent a wider catastrophe, they did what was called a controlled release of the toxic chemicals in some of the train cars. That created a huge black cloud of smoke over the town. The governor here said it was a matter of life and death that people evacuate and stay away while that happened.
You know, that old phrase, death riding a big black horse, that's what it felt like. I'm serious, it really did.
And then a couple of days later, the all clear was given. Residents returned to their homes. Since that time, they have been feeling very uneasy about what's happening.
We've been talking about moving somewhere different. Literally before they even did the controlled release, the fish were already dying in the water. It's like, I don't trust that.
You know, we have estimated based on our sampling and modeling about 3,500 dead fish across that space.
There have been persistent reports of health problems, people saying they get headaches, irritated eyes, runny noses.
Most people can be around these volatile organic compounds at low levels without really feeling health effects. However, at higher levels, especially over a longer period of time, then we can have longer-term health effects.
They've set up a special clinic here to help people if they have those problems, and officials are saying to go see a doctor if in fact you have some symptoms. But they continue to say that they believe that the air and water here are safe.
We believe the water's safe. Okay. Here's to Caroline.
The other significant development is that the EPA, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency here, has ordered the company, the rail company, Norfolk Southern, to clean up the contaminated area.
In no way, shape, or form will Norfolk Southern get off the hook for the mess that they created.
The EPA has said that if they do not do that, Norfolk Southern, that EPA will step in and clean up the disaster site and bill the company to the tune of 3 times what the cost could be. The bottom line, there are huge trust issues here. Residents don't believe that the rail company is going to stay here and take care of the situation as the rail company has promised.
These families have babies and children, and I'm just so upset.
Residents are also very skeptical of politicians and government officials here. So that's where we are now. It's something of a standoff. Officials saying it's safe, residents not believing them, and waiting to see if, in fact, Norfolk Southern follows through on its commitment to clean up the mess that they made here.
For more on that, I spoke earlier to Dr. Erin Haynes, an environmental scientist who'll be studying the long-term impacts on the community. I started by asking her what exactly she'll be looking at.
I've seen the communities struggle with understanding their exposure, and EPA has been there to help look at indoor air quality and also beginning a start for soil. But I see a great need to further examine contaminants that might be in their soil, particularly as gardening season comes up and people want to get, in their dirt and dig. I think they need to know what's in their soil as they do that, and if it's safe to eat the fruits and vegetables. And then also what's in the well water of residents living around the area over time. Those contaminants may not be there in their drinking water yet, but they may come and be present even in a year or more.
Well, that raises quite a few questions I'd like to unpack a bit. Let's talk about the soil first of all. What kind of chemicals are we talking about there, and what might be the risks? Obviously, it's something you want to study, you don't know, but what kind of things are we talking about?
That's a great question. And in fact, I don't know. exactly what those chemicals are. When those gases burned, those chemicals in the air burned, and during the explosion and then the controlled burn after, they formed new chemicals in that high heat environment. So those new chemicals have now settled out and are in the ground and in the sediment of streams. And that's the first question. What are they?
And when it comes to the water, you were saying this might take time. Is this literally because it takes time to filter through? Once again, just unpack that a bit for me.
So people have raised lots of concerns, and they're warranted. What about our well water? Because that does not go through the typical municipal water treatment plant. It's from the well. I'm not concerned about the well water being contaminated right now, because all of those chemicals are on the surface, they're on the soil, and they have to go down, down deep into the soil before they reach the water table.
What is the sort of time scale of an event like this? How big is the aftermath? Are we talking months, years? Give me a feeling.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I think this community needs long-term monitoring for their health symptoms. We don't know what the impacts are going to be to mothers, children, even to the wildlife. I think they need long-term follow-up for health and exposure.
Does this feel like a pretty, major incident to you?
This was a major disaster. It was a major traumatic event for the residents. And I think that there's going to be long-term cleanup and health monitoring needed to follow these residents.
Who should pay for all of this?
I love the mindset that if you make a mess, you clean it up. So I look to the railroad.
Thank you very much indeed. This week marks the one-year anniversary of Russia's devastating war in Ukraine, which of course has had a terrible human impact. And one of our viewers, Pete, got in touch via the Sky News app to ask what damage is Putin's war doing to the environment, to our planet.
Thank you, Pete, for the question. I'm now in Lviv city now. Besides economic destruction, social destruction, and human loss, the environmental destruction is huge. It's the destruction of nature. It's the habitats, eco corridors for 1/3 of country. Contamination of habitats, soil and water with mines, toxic elements from munition, river pollution, radiation leaks, waste in huge amount. Surface and vegetation, forest cover damage, animals killed or run away. Estimated damage, it's already by 50 billion pounds. And currently, almost 500,000 hectares of forest are under occupation or in the war zone. And another 2.4 million hectares have been liberated but need to be restored.
Now, before we go, just a reminder that you can watch the Daily Climate Show. That's on at 3:30 p.m. on weekdays. And remember that you can also get all the latest climate and environmental news on the Sky News website or app by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. And join us next week when I'll be in Scotland enjoying a dram of peated whiskey and finding out why this king of soils is not only important for a stiff drink, but also for our climate.